you'll see it's everything you want it to be. Make a wish, pretty star, but rise above the sea as we are.
Welcome to ILTV's live 2021 election night coverage. I'm Aaron Porras.
And I'm Ladar Gravey-Lazi, and we are here for the fourth serial election in Israel in 2 years' time.
Yeah, roughly 6.5 million eligible voters taking to the polling stations to make their voices heard. And it's been a very crazy day. We've been having reports of low voter turnout, then high voter turnout, possibly coming in later. I mean, parties that we thought were not going to passing. It's been weird. How are you guys feeling?
Just like any other elections they did in the past few years, there are tons of rumors. 80% of them turn out to be wrong at the end of the day. And there is one huge surprise that nobody predicted during the day. This is what we're going to see in the next 30 minutes. Some big surprise, and 80% of the rumors going astray.
We're definitely hearing about major surprises, and everyone should stay tuned to see as we get the results, because it will be different than we thought they were going to be.
We have a lot.
Or they won't be different than what we thought they're going to be. We have absolutely no idea. I just want to remind you that Shimon Peres used to say that the polls are just like perfume. Great to smell, but be very careful. Don't drink it. Yeah. And I think we should listen to this wise advice here.
All right, but as we noted, this is the fourth election, which is unprecedented in Israeli history. So let's take a look at how we got here.
אני מוכרח לומר שלצערי הרב לא עלה בידינו כולנו למצוא מספיק מן המשותף כדי להימנע מסבב בחירות נוסף וכדי לאפשר לכנסת ה-23 ולחבריה לממש במלואו את המנדט שניתן לנו. אנחנו יוצאים כולנו למערכת בחירות לא פשוטה. אנחנו יצרנו את הפתח לתקווה. נתניהו לא יהיה ראש ממשלה במדינת ישראל. היום צו השעה הוא החלפת שלטונו של נתניהו.
אנחנו מביאים היום לישראל מיליוני חיסונים. בקרוב אנחנו נהיה המדינה הראשונה בעולם לצאת מהקורונה. גדעון ובנט אלה כל הזמן מתחפשים.
הגיע הזמן לשינוי.
התנאי לשינוי, שאנשים יבינו שרק הצבעה לתקווה חדשה יכולה לעשות שינוי.
Widely accepted at this point, almost pretty much accepted across the spectrum, that Bennett is likely going to find himself in the position of kingmaker, where it'll be his job essentially to decide whether or not we have a coalition.
האמת היא שהמבחן בעוד שבוע זה מי יהיה ראש ממשלה, אני או לפיד.
תסתכלו רגע על הימין, כי יש מה ללמוד ממנו. ברגע שמריחים בחירות, הימין אומר דבר אחד: אני רוצה לנצח.
ואת האזרחים הנפלאים שלנו שעברנו יחד את הקורונה ראשונים בעולם. יכולים לעשות הכל, להצדיק את הכלכלה, לייצב את הכלכלה, לייצב את מדינת ישראל, להביא להצלחה בלתי רגילה שהבאנו בחיסונים גם בכלכלה. אבל לצורך זה, אל תישארו בבית, בואו להצביע, בואו להכריע.
All right, now let us properly now introduce our gorgeous panel of expert guests here who will be joining us throughout the night. We have former Yesh Atid Knesset member Rabbi Dov Lipman and legal counsel for the Hallel Likud Forum and In Tirtzu, Ziv Ma'or.
And political commentator Tami Molad Hayo. Thank you all so much for being here. Happy Election Day.
Yes,
Yeah,
absolutely.
We'll know how happy it is in just a few minutes.
So we're here at the fourth elections, right? Once again, and yet 3 elections, people keep voting Benjamin Netanyahu into power. Will this time be any different?
You know, the build-up the last few days, we see Netanyahu, you just saw him now appearing at concerts, people feeling good. There's a very high percentage of people who aren't sitting and analyzing all the plans. They just vote with their feelings at the moment. And this timed, whether he timed it this way or it timed it this way for Netanyahu, I think you are going to see Likud surpass what the polls were showing before because of this just good, happy, free feeling that people feel after a year of Corona.
Tami?
Yeah, I agree with Dov. I think it's too many people are voting according to their passing feelings. What happened the last week or two or whatever, and I think that's why we are at our fourth election.
Do we have that short of a memory as an electorate?
Because we do. We don't want to think about the bad things. That's why always when you ask Israelis, are you happy? We're always the happiest people in the world.
Number 11.
In the midst of wars, if we have a war, we're still the happiest people in the world. We're optimistic. We're optimistic beyond repair in a way. And in that sense, I have to say also, even if you do not agree with Netanyahu, there are a few things that he was right about. Even a broken clock is right twice a day, and so. And we are after a very, very difficult year. We're getting out of a very difficult year. We have no idea what's going to happen in 2 weeks' time. Everyone is hurrying up to see a show and to sit in a restaurant because we don't know what's going to happen in a month's time. So people want to vote according to their
emotions.
To their emotions,
Their
which is fine. And by the way, I have to say, even if you do not agree with Netanyahu, he is still a legitimate candidate. He still is.
No.
That's.
Yes.
I want to take your question to the technicalities. I agree with all what has been said, but the thing is that the right has managed to unite itself behind Netanyahu, while the opposition to Netanyahu has three heads, three very potent individuals who are capable in theory to become prime minister. They want to be prime minister, and if they will manage eventually to assemble a coalition that will allow them to put Netanyahu aside, then will come the question, who will lead them, who will be the prime minister? And there is no way that they will manage to give a proper answer to this question without a fifth election cycle.
Well, that really is actually, my next question, because let's assume that Netanyahu is ousted, which at the moment seems fairly unlikely, but who would make the best prime minister? Yair Lapid, Gideon Sa'ar, or Naftali Bennett? Yeah.
Right, without getting into who people voted for or not, there's no doubt that during this campaign, Bennett, at the very least, in terms of plans that he put out, things that he did during Corona as defense minister, definitely is positioning himself as someone who has strong abilities. He's proven himself. He was economy minister years ago, then education minister, then defense minister. So I think if you're talking about resumes, about people who are there in the path, I think he's definitely asserted himself as that. And remember, a lot of people who are not necessarily in the right wing and disagree with him about a lot of the policies on the right wing, they still see him as someone who has those abilities and might have even voted for his party in this election. So as a stepping point to the future, I think this has definitely helped him and his standing in terms of a premiership at some point.
I have to say that I completely disagree. I think what he did 2 days ago, signing the declaration that he's not going to sit in Lapid's government, was the end of this position that he took. If people saw him before as a leader, as someone who can stand against Netanyahu, against all the pressure, well, when push came to shove, then he broke down, and he sat in front of the TV and he signed this ridiculous paper saying something that nobody believed him before, nobody believes him after. He turned himself from someone who could be a real leader and prime minister with backbone and everything to someone who is, at the end of the day, is still Netanyahu's minion.
And what about Yair Lapid, right? Netanyahu has said that Yair Lapid is his primary opponent, and that yet Lapid refuses to say that he's officially running for prime minister.
This is a method of Netanyahu. He did it in the 2019 elections with Benny Gantz. He pinpointed him as his most prominent opponent, and the left united behind Benny Gantz, even though Benny Gantz was proven to be completely unworthy of the faith he was granted by the left of Israel. And he did the same with Lapid. Netanyahu, of course, he designed that and designed the same with Lapid. He marked Lapid as the most unstable person among this trio of Lapid, Bennett, and Sa'ar. He was the most unstable. He is the most comfortable opponent for Netanyahu, and this is why Netanyahu singled him out as an opponent. As for your question, Aaron, I must give you a question. Deciding who among those three is the most capable potential prime minister, it's like asking me, listen, you've lost your golf swing, which tricycle are you going to choose right now? All the three of them are quite the same in my eyes, but what is common to the three of them is also the fact that they're so behind in terms of political skills behind Netanyahu. Now, The three of them were ministers in Netanyahu's governments in the past few years, senior ministers in those governments, and shown some skills. In my eyes, the most important skill that needs to be shown, and Netanyahu is also not acing this, is one's capability to apply their policy against the will of the unofficials, of the civil servants, of the general attorney, and of the court. This is how a politician is being judged in Israel right now. The three of them fail, and Netanyahu also fails in this.
Tommy, it looks like
that's not the test. That's not the test. I think that the thing in my eyes, and I think everyone who understands that without civil servants, there is no country, there is no state, there is no citizens. We get nothing. But I think the thing about Netanyahu is that he wakes up when there's an election, and he wakes up and he's great at noticing, at seeing who is the one who really endangers him, and that was Gideon Sa'ar this time. And he chose Lapid not because he thought that Lapid was the easiest one for him to stand in front. And in that sense, Lapid was very, very smart to say, I'm not in this game. You want to play the game? Play it alone. Lapid was very, very smart. The thing that Netanyahu did is he completely broke down the persona that Gideon Sa'ar tried to present as the follower of the leader of the Likud. He had to leave the Likud, he had to build up a new party, and then Netanyahu didn't even gave him the courtesy of dealing with him as if he is running against him. And in that sense, Netanyahu is really the best politician we had here, and I don't think that's a good thing. Because we don't need a politician, we need a prime minister.
Well, first of all, I just want to let everybody know that we have now a live feed actually to the Likud and to the Yesh Atid headquarters. We can see a little bit of the excitement that may be building there as the results are going to come in very soon. But I want to move on to my next question, because, and Tommy, you kind of spoke to this a little bit, but many of the people that we've spoken to and that we've heard from in the past have said, just not Netanyahu, right? That even if they respect him, they've had enough of him after 14 years. Do you think that we should have term limits? And if so, what should they be?
There's no doubt that I think it would be a good thing for Israel to have term limits. I think that even the best leader, the most qualified leader, the most capable leader, at a certain point in time, it's not a good thing, and it really does become about staying in power. Everyone agrees Netanyahu has done wonderful things for Israel, and now the elections have simply become the issue of yes Netanyahu or no Netanyahu. And along the way, what happens is very capable younger ministers who in a normal situation would grow and grow into the position have been squashed to the point that they run away, as we've just talked about. All these people were with Netanyahu, and now they're not there anymore, and then we don't have the natural flow from one leader to the next leader to the next leader. I think that's a failure.
Well, Likud in general, I think, has only had 4 heads in what, 50, 60, 70 years?
Well, that's true, but their premiership has just been the last few decades. But the point of all of these ministers who really are capable have either left to another party, left politics, and they don't have the ability to grow into that position. Then when everyone says, who else can be prime minister? Well, you've squashed them or chased them away, and that, I think, is a failure which is unfair to the Likud, and I also think it's unfair to the people of Israel and not the path. So term limits would really help to stop that from happening.
I disagree with the idea of term limits. I think that the very idea, and I know that it exists in the most prominent democracy in the world, in the States, I think it's undemocratic. I think that if the people want a certain leader, regardless of how much he already served, they should be able to vote for him. This is how democracy works. Now, in terms of the problem that you've mentioned, Dov, the real problem that we have over here, that the system is oversimplified. It does not suit the very pluralized nature of our nation. We have to decentralize the government. We have to have a bicameral system. We have to have regional elections. We have to have a government that is not chosen by the parliament but independently. This will solve the issue of very prominent politicians that go astray because of the fact that we have such a talented prime minister.
But someone who has been in office for 14 years, because this system is working for him, will never let any change come into play.
I agree with this.
Any change. So that if we really need a change, and I think everybody agrees that we need to see some change in Israel in the system, then Netanyahu has to go. And it has nothing to do with anything else except for the fact that the system as it is, broken as it is, works for him it works so well for him
It also
that there
works
is
for
no
the
one
Israeli
else
public.
almost.
It also works for his
No,
own-
it doesn't, because we
it's a
have
question
no
of-
options.
Now, in my eyes, it's a question of, I agree with the need for change, but do I have to give up on Netanyahu for this change? The answer is yes. Do I want it? Do I prefer this systemic change over another term of Netanyahu? The answer is no, I prefer Netanyahu to be in.
Well,
All
I
right,
don't.
well, with that in mind, we now have a little bit more of an idea of what our panel thinks. But let's take a look really quickly at who Israelis on the streets of Tel Aviv are voting for and why.
But I'm voting for Bibi because coming from Belgium, it's so important to have a good, strong personality in front of Israel on the international scheme. So that's why I'm voting for him.
אני הצבעתי מרץ. זו מפלגה עם עקרונות. אני גם מצדדת במרב מיכאלי, אבל אנחנו רוצים ששניהם יצליחו לעבור את אחוז החסימה וליצור גוש של שמאל. אנחנו מאוד מאוד מודאגים מה-so-called דיקטטורה שמשפיעה על חיינו בצורה מאוד דרמטית. אין לנו כבר חופש, אין לנו חופש בחירה, אין לנו חופש תנועה, אין לנו חופש הפגנה.
אני מתכנן להצביע ליאיר לפיד. האמת שאנחנו מחפשים שינוי. לא בגלל שלא היה נורא עד עכשיו או משהו כזה, אבל כרגע מה שקורה, החברה שלנו מתפצלת, ואנחנו רואים את זה בכל מקום, במיוחד פה, שזה מקום שהרבה אנשים מגיעים אליו.
אני מצביע למרב מיכאלי.
כבר הצבעתי בבוקר מוקדם ליאיר לפיד, כי הגיע הזמן לעשות את השינוי, לעשות את כל הדברים שצריך, כי לדעתי מספיק הנזק שנגרם.
אני מצביע למפלגה שהיא בעד ארץ ישראל, תורת ישראל ועם ישראל. איזה שלא תהיה. מי שיש לה מצע כזה, לשם אני שם את הפתק שלי.
All right, now we are also joined by Vivian Berkovici, the former Canadian ambassador to Israel. Thank you so much for being with us today.
Pleasure.
All right, now, first of all, we've just heard actually a little bit from some of our men on the street and who they're voting for. I don't know if you'd like to maybe react to them. Dov, go ahead.
Everybody is a strategic genius now in Israel.
Everybody
Unbelievable, yeah.
I will say that the number of people who told me that walking into the building to vote, they still were not decided, is way beyond what has been in past elections. Really.
I was one of them.
Okay, sorry, Eric. So really, people didn't know, and that's why there might be a significant gap between the polls that we've seen until now and the results that we see tonight, because there really is no way of predicting that. What do those people decide at that last moment, and why? Was it to make sure certain parties cross the threshold? Was it to avoid those parties because they don't want to waste their vote? So that's a lot of the surprises that we're going to see are very much related to that.
But, you know, we've also seen, or we've heard throughout the day, that there's been really low voter turnout. I mean, how may this affect the results?
Well, traditionally, when there is a low turnout, it helps the peripheral parties. There is more motivation to vote among the Arab parties and among the Haredi parties. Now, what is surprising on these specific elections, that we hear that the low turnout is on these specific sectors. And there is a possibility that there will be no Arab party in the coming Knesset. This is a possibility that I'm hearing often, read of in several, one of the surprises that people are talking about being concocted among the pollers. So this is going to be a surprise, but on the very last hour, the update says that at least the Haredim are waking up and coming in big numbers and starting to catch up on the turnout that we saw in previous elections.
Same is happening with some of the Arab towns. But it always works for the smallest, for the smaller parties. But I think it says something to the politicians. The Israelis had enough. We are at the fourth election, and we all know that at the end of the day, judging from the polls up till now, it's gonna divide almost the same. It doesn't matter exactly how within the masses, but at the end, pro-Bibi against Bibi. That's not an agenda for a country. That's not an agenda for people who are after a very, very difficult year, both economically and personally, and we have so many issues that we need to deal with, and there is no government to do that for the past 2 years, and we're not very hopeful. I think that's why people are not voting.
Vivian, I want to bring you into this conversation finally. Now, you know, what do you make of some of these recent polls and surprises and voting patterns that we're kind of seeing come out, you know, as the day goes on?
Well, I mean, we don't really have any patterns. We don't really know what's going on. I mean, we've all been reading the same stuff. that low voter turnout in the Arab neighborhoods and Arab towns. I haven't heard anything about low voter turnout in Haredi towns and cities. I would expect that, as usual, they will come out in force. And of course, we're all intrigued, I certainly am, by the latest, which is that we're going to have dramatic and decisive results, unlike any results in any previous election in Israel. So really, at this point, I think it's a lot of blah blah. But we do, of course, know what the polls were telling us until we had the blackout kick in on Friday. And I think we all have a pretty good sense of where it's all going to land.
It's also important to remember, because we're only a few minutes away from actually getting some initial results, that it's going to be a long night, a long few days. Even what we see, right? Even what we see initially, by the time all the votes are counted, recounted, the double envelopes are counted, which are more than usual because of Corona. There's a long process. Correct. Yeah. So there's over 600,000. Wow. That's 15 mandates. There's a long process here until we understand exactly what's happening. You'll have parties complaining, appealing, especially those who are near the threshold and either just barely got in or didn't get in. So there's going to be a lot going on. I mean, I'm already seeing the lawyers are getting ready for various parties.
I'm one of them.
I'm sorry?
I'm one of them.
There we go.
We are thinking of pressing charges against the Central Election Committee tomorrow morning for libel. There was an issue.
Already?
Yeah, already.
Wait a minute. Wait a second.
Who did they libel against?
What happened?
Against us, against Im Tirtzu. This morning, Im Tirtzu issued an ad, issued a communique that says that there was a problem with the app that was given to the employees of the Central Committee. And we vouch for the fact that there was such a malfunction, and the committee said that it is fake news, blamed us for fake news. So we're going to have to sue
the
to
first
stand
time.
for. Yeah,
it happened before that. Not everything every group with an agenda said was exactly, let's say, correct or truthful.
This time it is indeed correct.
You know,
this was correct, and this is
illegal. They don't work for you. They work for the Israeli people, so it's okay for them not to take just your opinion.
It's also okay for them to be criticized by the public and by non-profit.
Yeah. All right, well, we're just a few minutes away from receiving the initial exit polls, so do you guys have any predictions, general predictions?
Last minute.
Yeah, last minute predictions.
The most resultiest results we've ever had.
Put it on the line, okay.
I'll do it.
Vivian first, and I'll go.
I came late, I'm going first.
Okay, go ahead.
We're going to end up with a right-wing coalition, eventually.
Strong right-wing coalition, or is it going to be Gvuli?
No, it's going to be strong because Bennett's going to go with them. And I think Yesh Atid's going to break 20.
Really?
Yep.
So I'm going to go a little bit the other way. I think Likud definitely going higher than we had expected. Yesh Atid a little bit lower because blue and white, I believe, will be higher. Really? The Zionist Party getting in and strong, and the Ram Party, Arab Party, because I'm seeing the voter turnout in their cities at 30-35%. I don't think they get in. That's going to all have dramatic results, ultimately very much helping the right wing.
Why do you think blue and white's going to surge?
Just based on information and things that I'm seeing.
Strategic voting, yeah.
All right. Breaking news, I have absolutely no idea. Someone's
honest in the studio.
I think I'm going to wait and see, not just the polls, I'm going to wait for the real results. Because I'm kind of interested in seeing who will actually be in the Knesset. So, but until then, we're going to have a few weeks where we are all going to have a lot of work, and there are a lot of people, including lawyers. We're going to make a little bit of money, which is fine after the last year. So, so there was going to be something to talk about.
Well, she stole my answer. Not only I do not predict in general, I also am a bit tainted because I'm getting some updates from the exit polls. So I'm hearing about a surprise. It's only fair to say that there is a very interesting thing that's going on with Bennett. Okay, they say that he made way better than people have expected, and that he might be the next prime minister. This is something we're hearing. Either way, he's going to be the kingmaker. So this is what we're currently hearing. This basically says a right-wing government, a right-wing coalition, and I must once again refrain from what I just said. This is a rumor. I said earlier in this broadcast that
I was totally there. You had me.
Yeah, 80% of rumors are proven wrong, but this is the current rumor. This is what's going out in terms of leaks from the exit polls themselves. What we're going to know in just a few minutes what's going on.
All right, well, for a quick refresher on where the parties stand, let's turn now to a brief party breakdown with Gabby Briner.
Fourth time lucky? We'll have to wait and see, but here's a look at the parties running for the 24th Knesset. The biggest party last Knesset was the Likud, that's Netanyahu's party, which is a right-wing Zionist party. And this election, their campaign focused on Israel's vaccine campaign success, as well as the normalization deals with the UAE and Bahrain. The second biggest party in the pro-Netanyahu bloc is Shas, the Sephardi ultra-Orthodox party, headed by Aryeh Deri. Then Then we've got United Torah Judaism, the party that represents the interests of Israel's Ashkenazi ultra-Orthodox population. Now, the last party that's in that pro-Netanyahu bloc is the far-right religious Zionist party. Bezalel Smotrich's party identifies as right-wing, religious and pro-annexation, and has come under fire for its homophobic and anti-Arab attitudes. So now let's move to the parties that are against Prime Minister Netanyahu. We'll start with Yesh Atid, that's Yair Lapid's centrist party, which is projected to be the largest party in that bloc. Their campaign has focused on harnessing frustration among Israel's secular community over the alleged preferential treatment dealt to the ultra-Orthodox during the lockdowns. The new kid on the block this election is Likud breakaway Gideon Sa'ar's party, New Hope. Sa'ar said he hopes to reform the justice system, and the party hopes to oust Netanyahu whilst maintaining the same right-wing character of the government. We've then got the Joint List, an alliance of Arab parties, which represents Israel's Arab population. Now, one of those parties broke away and forming the United Arab List, which is headed by Mansour Abbas. Then we've got Benny Gantz's Kahol Lavan, who entered Netanyahu's government after promising not to sit with him. Now we've got Merav Michaeli, who's the new head of the Labour Party, a party with a history. It was in power for Israel's first 30 years in its various forms. But recently, the party's presence in the Knesset has diminished. Meretz, run by Nitzan Horowitz, is also in the anti-Netanyahu bloc and has similar left-wing ideals to the Labour Party. Israel Beitenu, run by Avigdor Lieberman, is a right-wing secular party that aims to limit the power of the ultra-Orthodox parties in the Knesset. Now, there's one last party that's on the fence, not in either bloc. It's Yamina, headed by Naftali Bennett, who has not chosen to sit on either side. Many think he will have the power to decide who will be the next Prime Minister of Israel and which bloc will form the Knesset majority.
Okay, here we go. Okay. All right, so we've just gotten some of the initial polls. We're seeing that the Likud with Netanyahu has 31 seats, Yesh Atid's Lapid with 18, Gantz in the blue and white a surprising 7 seats. Followed by the Joint List, we have 9, Shas with 9, United Torah Judaism 7, Israel Beitenu 6, Meretz 6, Ram has not passed.
Yeah.
The Yamina Party has 8, New Hope has 6, Labour has 7, religious Zionist parties with 8, and the New Economic Party is also not passing. So I'm going to open this up.
Yeah, let's hear your thoughts.
I mean, just start doing the math right away, and you start seeing, okay, let's do it together. I mean, Likud 31, 8 religious Zionists, so now we're already at 39. You go to the Haredi parties together, they're at another 16. So where are we? We're at
65, but it's all
with Yamina.
With Yamina. Did anybody do the math?
If Bennett comes in, then it's 65.
Yeah. 65.
So we're talking about a stronger right-wing government than we even thought before, where it's 65 with Bennett. Bennett will squeeze Netanyahu.
No. The question is what's going on in the other camp. If we count, for instance, Sa'ar and Bennett and Lapid together, how much do they have jointly? And then you bring in Lieberman and one of the Haredi parties, maybe parts of it. No, Lieberman will not sit with the Haredim. So I think it's quite decisive.
I think it's, I mean, I'm sorry to say this, but I did say it a few minutes ago.
Yeah, you did.
Definitely.
I went over.
Listen, it's a wallop. It's, you always, BB just kills it. He's the best campaigner. And the other thing, we were talking earlier about, the peripheria and the sort of lower turnout. What it does is it favors, in some ways, it favors the very motivated political parties with a hard base. And in Israel, that's the ultra-Orthodox and Likud, right? The other parties just don't have, Meretz has the same kind of hard base, but it's much smaller. But they just don't have the motivated voters. The support is generally kind of, wider and shallower.
What happened to the Black Flag protesters, the tens of thousands of Israelis who've been constantly screaming for the better part of the last year, anything but Bibi? What happened to those voters?
They get to 58. That's the question you asked before. To put all of them together, not counting the Joint List, they get to 58. If you put Meretz in there, so I'm talking about Yamina all the way through Meretz, which is almost an impossibility to happen, they still only get to 58. Again, assuming that these results stick and as they are right now, which means that you're asking the question, where are they? They're there. They're there. There's a majority still against Netanyahu, but they can't put together a coalition, which is the point that you made before.
Okay, so then you dump Lieberman and Yisrael Beitenu and you bring in Shas.
There's no
with
possibility.
Meretz. Shas and Meretz together.
Why not?
And Yesh Atid, it's
Why not?
Shas and Meretz together can work. That can work. That's not a problem.
So
Derry and
essentially what
Gafni from the religious parties have both stated, as opposed to their previous statements, that they would actually look at the results pragmatically.
Of course they will.
Except
but
that
at the end of
Shas,
the
I
day-
think, is more pragmatic, and Shas is a much less extreme tradition. A lot of Shas voters aren't really aligned with the ultra-Orthodox agenda. It's much more
in the
the
long run,
Mizrahi
this
agenda.
will mean the end
Most
of
of the
Meretz.
voters
Exactly.
aren't.
So, and you know, my information, which isn't bad, is that Aryeh Deri is very mindful of that and paying attention to that. He can't lose control of his base.
I have to say
So
that
essentially what you're all saying is that there is no way for a left-wing government to form?
No, this dude just made a very creative analysis, which I...
Well, it's a little far-fetched in a way.
Shas and Meretz together seems a completely reasonable fit, but Aryeh Deri has made surprises in the past. Tamar Zandberg, the leader of Meretz, not so much. I do not see her survive politically if she will make this concession. But I don't know.
it's Nitzan Horowitz. Yeah, she's not the leader of Meretz.
She's not, I'm not familiar what's going in this
okay.
periphery.
Okay.
So we're talking about well, same goes over there. Let's put it aside. Nitzan Horowitz is a representative of the LGBTQ community in Meretz, and it aligns very fine with the agenda of the party of Meretz.
And has worked very well with Deri, by the way, in the past Knesset.
When you ask Shas, when reporters asked Shas about their official agenda regarding to LGBTQ issues, they declined to answer. They did not even give an answer because they refused to acknowledge this phenomena of LGBTQ.
No.
So to see Shas sitting with Nitzan Horowitz, something that I will...
All right, we're going to take a quick break and hear a word from our sponsor, but don't go anywhere because when we come back, we'll have more on the initial exit polls.
You'll see it's everything we want it to be. Make a wish upon a star. Make a wish, yeah. Make a wish. We rise above the sea as we all make a wish. It's everything we want it to be. Make a
Benny, that's a surprise, Jim.
All right, thank you so much for rejoining us. We are now at the moment that we've all been waiting for. Again, initial exit polls starting to come out. Just remember that the final results will not be in for at least another few days, probably longer. But again, starting from the top, we have the Likud with Netanyahu at about 31 seats. We have it here on the screen. That's very nice. We have Yesh Atid with 18. We have the Blue and White Party with 7. We have the Joint List with 9. We have Shas with 9. We have the United Toward Judaism with 7. Israel Beitenu 6. Meretz 6. Ram is not passing the threshold. Yamina with Bennett 8. New Hope with Sar 6. Labor with 7. Religious Zionist parties 8. And the New Economic Party, again, below the threshold with nothing. And now we're going to be joined with more on the initial results, political analyst and former campaign organizer for the Blue and White Party, Shai Evan. Shai, thank you so much for being with us. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you.
All right,
Good evening.
so tell us something new. What's the word on the ground? Are there surprises? Are you surprised? What's happening?
Well, every time we see the exit polls, we are surprised. New things happen, and we do see what happened in the last 3 days since the last polls were released. We see that Gantz got a lot of people were sitting on the fence, not sure if to vote for him or not, went to him. It was what Lapid lost. Lapid lost 2 or 3 seats to Gantz in the last few days. And we see what happened to Sal, who was a candidate who started with 24 seats on the Holy Pearls, and now We see him only with 5 or 6 in the exit polls. These are very, very bad numbers. He will have to think, shall he still be part of the political system, or shall he retire after this very, very big loss for him tonight?
And as a former campaigner for Blue and White, are you disappointed with the support for Gantz and Lapid?
No, actually no, because I think the fact that they ran separately damaged both of them in the end. And I think that Lapid ran a campaign without saying that he wants to be prime minister, and without giving almost any interviews, without being out there and fighting with an agenda against Netanyahu. So I'm not surprised with the outcome that he got. I'm happy that Gantz went in, and I think that he did an incredible effort in these 3 months to do something that is usually impossible. Usually, when you reach a point when you're close to the threshold and you're even under, you're gone politically. That's what happened to Huldai also. And Gantz made an incredible recovery by giving a lot of interviews and talking directly to people and being very, very honest in this campaign. I think you've done a very good job, and I'm happy with the results. Nobody expected he will get 7 or 8 seats. But again, we have to wait to the final results to see if that is true.
So do you think that there's a chance that Lapid can form a coalition? And what do you think it'll look like?
Maybe a rotation.
I think the only chance, if we will be very surprised with the vote we will see in the next few days coming from the soldiers and Corona voters, but I don't see it happening. I don't see any chance that Bennett, he can make the shots now. I don't see any chance that Bennett will give Lapid to form a government, and I don't see Bennett sending Israel again with only 8 seats for re-election. So unfortunately, for my personal beliefs, I think that Netanyahu won the election and he's going to be the next prime minister. The question is, what will be the price that he will pay to get Bennett and maybe other members into his government?
All right, Shai, Evan, thank you so much for being with us.
Thank you. Have a good evening.
All right, so we're back here.
Yeah, I want to put something very interesting in those results, and this is the party of Ram, which according to all exit polls did not go in. Now, the head of Ram, his name is Mansour Abbas, not many English speakers know the figure, but it was a very interesting persona in the past few months because he was in discussion and openly colluding with Netanyahu. Now, as a Zionist Jew, this gave me hope that maybe, finally, we are starting to see within the Arab minority some portion that is beginning to be more tolerant towards Zionism, toward the Jewish majority.
At the very least, he took a very pragmatic approach towards politics.
Okay, so pragmatism. And so his party, Ram, is completely out of the race right now. And the only Arab party, by the way, this means that the Arab minority is completely underrepresented in the upcoming Knesset, which is a shame in my eyes. I wish that in a Democratic Party, every segment will get full representation. But the fact is that the Arab minority said no to pragmatism towards Zionism, and this makes me very...
But I think the whole Ram play wasn't really about endorsing or embracing Zionism. It was much more about social conservatism. Mansour Abbas is an Islamist, and he was very candid and open. Yeah, and he was very candid and open about the fact that his social values, his social views, were totally aligned with the ultra-Orthodox. Those guys have a lot more in common than they and their constituencies do with the majority of Israelis. That was the basis of his
Along that this
collusion.
comes with tolerance towards Zionism, towards Judaism within Israel, then this is fine.
I'm not sure it's quite that simple. I don't know how much tolerance
Well, you said endorsement. I'm not saying endorsement. I'm saying toleration. Aaron said pragmatism. I accept this. I endorse this pragmatism. This is enough for me, and that's something that doesn't exist. In fact,
Rabbi Littman, go ahead.
The major takeaway, and again, I've done all the math here, and we got it all set.
You've been working on it.
I've been working on it. Okay, Naftali Bennett at either 8, 9, or 7 seats, depending on which channel, and if they're accurate, he is absolutely in the position of being the kingmaker right now. I do want to point out, according to all 3 channels, with Bennett, Netanyahu would have a coalition, either 61, 62, or 63. That's according to all 3 channels. If you flip to the other side, to the center left, even if you combine Yamina, all the way with Meretz, which is almost an impossibility just to work out. But let's say they tried to do it. According to channels 11 and 13, they still did not get to 61. According to channel 12, they would get to the 61 point, assuming that these numbers add up. So in theory, the possibility of all the parties who don't want Netanyahu coming together under a Yamina government, but a prime minister with 9 seats, 8 seats, 7 seats, it's a remote possibility. We have a long way to go to see what happens with the process of the presidents, the recommendations, and the coalition building. But at the moment, Naftali Bennett sits as the kingmaker, as the one person who said, I'm not committing going either way. I'm not with Netanyahu. I don't want Netanyahu to be prime minister, but it could be that he left that door open to go with him, and then we'll see what he gets from Netanyahu and joins that government.
So this begs the question, what is Naftali Bennett going to ask for? What's he after?
Oh, well, he's probably, it doesn't really matter. He's going to do what Netanyahu, at the end of the day, what Netanyahu wants him to do.
If he's in the kingmaker position, he might.
But yeah, well, he'll crack down. I'm quite sure that he's going to crack down. But I think that the bomb that this poll is setting in the midst of the Israeli society is Smotrich. It's Ben Gvir. It's the fact that there is that racism is now fully in the Knesset with 7 or 8 seats.
Fully with the Arab parties. They're also racist. There are no Jews living in and out of town.
No, they're not racist, and they're not racist. They're not racist, and they never ran with a racist ticket. It's completely different. And I have to say that I'm a bit shocked and I'm a bit appalled with that, and I'm very disappointed with the Israeli public, because that's not Judaism the way I see it.
You should vote the public out.
No, I'm just saying, it's okay. I'm used to being the minority, politically speaking, but still, it's not something we could just say, okay, that happened. No, that's a real.
You have to remember that for a lot of those voters, and a lot of those voters, seeing what happened, let's say in Oslo and other places, they said, we have to vote those people out.
Totally, I agree with you. I disagree with each other. Yeah, no, but if the answer is putting someone like Ben Gvir in the Knesset, well, that's kind of a different response.
Well, I want to jump in on 2 points. One is, what's the prize that Bennett's going, what's the brass ring? He's already done defense. It's going to be foreign affairs. That's the last thing he kind of needs.
I thought he's so great with economy. He has this whole Singapore plan and
foreign
everything.
affairs is what you do as your kind of, your apprenticeship.
Plus, if you have a really
he doesn't need an economic portfolio, and an economic portfolio in Israel is like the kiss of death.
All right, well, here we have some new exit polls coming out. Again, we see the Likud climbing up all the way up, it looks, to 32
seats.
Borderline 33.
And Yesh Atid dropping
Smashed through that ceiling.
17, yeah. I'm curious, actually, something that we haven't discussed in here. We're seeing some of the other seats. Again, Yamina with 7. The New Hope Party with 6. Avigdor Lieberman's Israel Beitenu with 7. And the Joint List with 8. Here we have the religious Shas and UTJ party with 9 and 7 respectively. Labor with 7, and Kahol Lavan, Blue and White with 7 as well. And then here we go.
We have Meretz with 4.
Whoa. Religious. They're going up. All right.
Yeah,
so Meretz now has 6. The religious Zionists with 7, and we have Ram and the New Economic Party. Again, still failing to pass the electoral threshold. Something I'm very curious about, actually, is the Bennett and Sal vote-sharing agreement. So far, we haven't really talked about that, and it's not really in the focus. But how is that maybe going to play out right now, or is that kind of irrelevant now that they're over?
What vote sharing agreement?
Well, the vote sharing, I mean, so if there's excess votes for one that didn't, not enough, so it might mean one more seat from one. Again, there will be a little bit of tinkering here and there, but when you're talking about parties that are sitting at 7 seats, 8 seats, 6 seats, 5 seats, it's not any situation where...
No, but in terms of the blocks. Now, the thing is that this specific mandate that might pass from the Netanyahu-tolerant bloc to the anti-Netanyahu bloc, this will not change anything according to those results. Netanyahu will be just a little bit itty-bitty, teeny-miny-mo weaker. This is what's going to happen. This means a mandate of voters of the Netanyahu-tolerant bloc actually voting, practically voting to the other bloc, which is fine, but this is not going to change any of the results. Now, as for what Bennett has on the table, what cards he has, unlike what happened after the 2013 elections when he colluded with Lapid to push Netanyahu to the corner, this time Bennett has 2 options, either to go with Netanyahu or to decide for 50. fifth elections, and to carry this cross with him that he is the bearer of the fifth elections, just like Lieberman was 3 election cycles ago.
Which it worked for him in that cycle.
Yeah, which it didn't work.
I'm going to like
Bennett is never going to do that.
Bennett is not going to do that.
Of course
Bennett is
not.
going to go into,
Yeah.
he's
So,
going to
but
go
what
in the
I'm saying-
BB camp, and he's going to be Minister of Foreign Affairs.
Well, he's
Well,
going
it
to go
depends
into
if
the
he's
BB
gonna-
camp. He is in the BB camp. He
saying he's
was
going
in
to,
BB's
but I say
camp.
that I know he's in.
What I'm saying, Vivian, that
Vivian and I are gonna have a
Bibi
bet.
might punish him.
Absolutely.
Bibi might punish him.
We're going to have a bet. I'm going to say defense. Vivian said foreign affairs. We'll see which way.
Well, I
But he
also say
was- he
defense.
He's already-
I also bet on
very
defense,
briefly,
but
but
I'm
he wants
saying,
it back.
and by the way, if
Oh
you
my
look
God,
at the
like a Israeli talk show,
very
right
final
on.
chord of his campaign is going for defense. This is what I think. But what I'm saying is Bibi might decide to punish him for not stating that he's going with him from the beginning, and given that Bennett really doesn't have any options, it's either Netanyahu or
Netanyahu
fifth
should
elections,
give him a present
then he
for what
might...
he did. He gave him the 32, 33 seats in the Knesset. Bennett gave him a present. Bennett worked for Netanyahu the whole way. What Bennett did by saying, I'm not going to sit with Netanyahu, I'm going to sit with Netanyahu, gave Netanyahu the ultimate case to come to the public and say, Gewalt, help us. We're
I do
losing.
believe whether or not Netanyahu will see it that way.
Of course he will.
Of course he won't.
Of course he will.
Even
of
if
course
you
he
are
will. He knows
right.
exactly. He made Bennett this small by making him sign this ridiculous paper 2 days ago. He made him smaller by using him. He used him the whole way. At the end of the day, if Netanyahu is smart, he's going to make Bennett the minister, the finance minister, because that's a sure tank. It's going to be a catastrophe.
I'm saying I'm
next
hearing
year.
finance,
I was
foreign defense.
you know what? I think actually he's going to be Minister of Water.
If he decides to punish him...
Jerusalem.
No,
And Jerusalem.
you can't get
It's
in any
water
trouble
in
there.
Jerusalem.
This
Usually
is
it goes
Netanyahu's
together.
way to punish politicians that threat him. No doubt, and I think that there is quite a chance that this is what Yamina will end with, because they will give him the choice either to do that or to vote for fifth elections. This is something that they will not do, and maybe Netanyahu will manage to corner them. This is...
He has said openly, Bennett, that he will not allow, and that this was his opening to join the Netanyahu government was, I will not allow there to be a fifth election. So now he'll say to the public, I didn't want Netanyahu, but this is what the people have chosen. Now I will go in to save Israel from a fifth election, and along the way, he will squeeze Netanyahu
Or in other
whenever
words,
he can.
I don't have any choice.
Yeah.
And what about, let's say, Gidon Saar, Avigdor Lieberman, Yair Lapid? Will any of them back down and enter a coalition with Netanyahu?
I don't see any possibility of any of those people doing so. Lapid has already shown that he will not do that. Lieberman for sure not. And Gidon Saar, if he does that, his entire political structure is built on we're the anti-Netanyahu. So none of them can do that, and they're all assuming that things
All
play
headed
out.
to the opposition,
headed to
most
the
likely.
opposition.
For those 3 individuals, there is no chance whatsoever. But I do believe that some representatives from the Saar party will eventually join the coalition, leave their party and join the coalition. This is something that it is indeed possible.
And remember,
Well, they
Netanyahu
already
is
did.
and
They
Netanyahu,
already did. Zika Hauser and Yoaz Hendel did it last time.
Netanyahu is a
They
master.
peeled
And
off.
the time before. There you go.
Netanyahu is a master at
Yeah.
going to those people, offering them a lot, and they're going to say to themselves, I have a choice of being an MK in the opposition where I can do nothing, or he's offering me minister of even water. They'll take it because there's that.
Water's important.
I have to say that's one of that's horrible, because being just a plain MK is a real important job, and you can do a lot. Just as a member of Knesset, you can really do a lot. And the fact that the politicians don't see that and they don't treat the Knesset seriously
But I don't think
is
the
horrible.
problem is that the
All right, one
Knesset doesn't
second,
see
we're
it seriously. I
seeing
think the
again
pro-
on the
Oh, yeah.
screen, the split screen from Lapid from Yeshatid headquarters and Likud headquarters.
Well, everybody's still waiting.
Wow, yeah.
Everybody's still waiting. Everyone
The
was so
results have come
afraid.
in, but they're still waiting, and soon I'm assuming people are going to start pouring in, especially at the Likud headquarters.
So I know that we've been talking a lot about what the possible coalition will be, and I think we're all fairly in agreement just because of the math that the right wing has a far greater chance of having it. What would be the ideal, and this is like one of my favorite questions recently, what would be your ideal coalition, assuming that none of their childish issues existed and they were all adults and decided to compromise for the sake of the nation?
The best thing.
You're pointing at me. I'm going. You can't go first every time.
You can't go first every time.
Why don't you go, Vivian?
I am. My dream coalition would have.
Here, look, we're seeing on the screen.
Oh, they're putting my dream up?
Well, they're
Wow.
putting the potential opposition at 58 versus the support at 55. But again, on 58, we're seeing
+7.
Sar, we're seeing
Oh, we're seeing
The joint list is on there. The joint list is on there.
Yeah.
We're seeing a
Down.
very interesting breakdown here.
And the 55, and you have to add a 7 for Yamina, for Bennett's party.
So my dream coalition
Yes.
would, I don't really actually care who's the prime minister so much, whether it's Lapid or if it's Bennett, but it would include Bennett's party, it would include Yesh Atid, it would include Shas, or some element.
Quite the field of.
Hang on, work with me here.
All right, I'm with you.
Some element of the Haredi world, which is right now forced into this binary kind of landscape, and a lot of them don't want to be in that. There are a lot of Haredim who want to support a party that's sensitive to their issues, but they're much more integrated into the economy and life here than those parties kind of present. So there's a real kind of disconnect. So we get some, tolerance. You said if everybody could kind of moderate and be a little more tolerant.
Everybody
just
wearing a
tweak and adjust, and we'll throw in Lieberman, and we got a few merits maybe and Avodah.
Yeah, you have every ideology
I think
possible.
I think included everyone.
Hang on. No, I don't have the Arab list in there. I'm just giving you kind of like, could those parties find a common ground in order to take this country forward and out of the very divisive dysfunction that we're now stuck in?
Do you think the answer is yes?
No, you asked the dream coalition.
Of course, the dream coalition. Of course. But you don't think there's any.
You asked me if I think there's a remote possibility? No.
Yeah, Meretz and Shas and Lapid.
No,
Yeah, of course.
I'm pretty grounded in reality.
I would say the best thing is what I would call a middle-of-the-road coalition where the specific interest groups are not having a strong seat at the table the way they do today. So in other words, marginalized extreme right-wing, marginalized extreme left-wing, even religious parties. I personally, as someone who is religious, don't think there's a place for a religious party in politics. Religious members of the mainstream parties can represent those interests. And then you can have a center-of-the-map group which comes together and starts addressing the major issues that are on the table for Israel instead of it being so much about the extremes.
Who's in your center? Because this country is extreme right. Like the majority of the parties.
I think the country has shifted right, but I don't think it's extreme right.
The country by and large is extreme right?
No, I'm talking about politically. We're talking about now.
I would.
Likud, Smotrich with his showing.
The parties to the right.
Yamina's very hard
to the right, yes, but I wouldn't say extreme right. I mean, we have seen.
I would say Smotrich and Ben Gvir are. I would say that Yamina and Likud are hard right.
Okay, hard right and extreme right is not the same.
Yeah.
Well,
Just talk to the
I just
ideology.
qualified it. What do you want to impale me?
Well, it will never happen,
I'm not dying on that
unfortunately, but I
sword.
think it's about time, after more than 70 years, that we will see an Arab party in the coalition. It doesn't really, it's not even a question of ideology. It's not even a question of Zionism. It's a question of whether or we are or we're not a democracy. 20% of Israelis are Arabs. And it's as if nobody even considers the fact of 20% of the citizens here can be part of any coalition, and what they want it regards only economics, it regards safety, personal safety, policing, things like that, and nobody even takes them into consideration. And I think that's really. It's 2021, it's about time.
Well,
it's about time. And there are enough people that we can work with. And I think Shas and the joint party can work together. You'll be surprised on how many laws they've already worked together perfectly. And the extreme right-wing parties, they should stay out, I think.
Well,
but that's the dream.
I agree that it's about time for Arabs to become part of the coalition. They were given a choice at this election specifically because there was an Arab head of party that, as we said, did not endorse but was pragmatically tolerant towards Zionism. They were given this choice and they chose against it. So unfortunately, we're not going to see Arab party in the coalition. As for my dream coalition, well, the Israeli public just voted for it.
Oh, wow. Yeah. All right, well, you're the lucky one here, I guess.
Original answer. All right, so,
We've discussed our dream coalitions, but what do Israelis on the street actually think the coalition will look like?
We'll return to the streets. Yeah.
I think it's going to be Likud, Bibi, it's going to be Bennett, and then the Haredi party.
Nobody knows. until the end of the day, more until a few days from now, then we'll know who will be or not.
אני חושב שאם אנחנו במצב הזה, כמו שאת עכשיו, אז אני חושב שביבי, לצערנו, יהיה בראשות הממשלה.
בנט, לדעתי, מרב מיכאלי, אני רוצה להאמין שתהיה. יאיר, אני לא מחבב.
לדעתי נראה לי בנט או גדעון סער, אבל אני מקווה מאוד שהם כבר כולם, כל הגוש הזה, זהו, מספיק, שילכו הביתה.
I think Bibi and the religious parties, and it's a shame. It's very disappointing, but that's the reality. All right, so we just heard a little bit from
The man on the street.
the electorate thinks the coalition will be. Of course, I think probably the most accurate guy is the guy with the Prime Minister shirt. Unfortunately, who says we have no idea. He's probably the one who's right. But Ziv, I understand that you've been telling us that you've got your finger on the pulse. Give us some updates. What's going on?
Well, the kingmaker have just spoken. Naftali Bennett have just gave his first statement and said, I'm only going to do what's best for the country, which sounds like a cliche. It is indeed a cliche. But what's important is what he did not say. He did not say, I'm going with Netanyahu. He did not say, I'm going against Netanyahu. I believe that when I've said earlier that Netanyahu is expected to punish Bennett, he's going to be punished for this as well. For the longer that he stays without saying, I'm going into Netanyahu's coalition, the more his party is going to, his party's currency is going to be proven less effective when it comes to dealing away the cards of who's going to be which minister. What's good for Bennett right now, and what's good for the nation, by the way, the best way to avoid fifth elections is for you to say as soon as possible, we heard the speech of the voter and we're going to Netanyahu's coalition.
Well, the game has started. We have to say the truth. The game has now started. Now it's a question, what are you going to give me, what I'm going to give you? Well, the market is open. So we'll have to see, and I think everybody's playing the game. But I think the most interesting thing is what I just saw that Miki Zohar from the Likud, someone who we haven't heard from in the past few weeks, I don't know if you've noticed, but he completely vanished, suddenly emerged and said, well, it's not going to be so easy with us and Smotrich and Ben Gvir. We're going to have a very difficult time with them. And if we won't work it out, then we'll have to go to the fifth election. Already, it's just, the polls are just out. Wait a day, something.
Well, first of all, it's playing hard to get, but one more interesting possibility that needs to be at hand is the fact that we're talking about Smotrich and we're talking about Ben Gvir. Ben Gvir is the most extreme right-wing party currently out the phase. In 2009, in Netanyahu's first coalition at the time, there was a uniform between the equivalent of Smotrich and the equivalent of Ben Gvir, and the extremists stayed out of the coalition. The list disjoined.
They didn't get into the Knesset.
No. Michael Ben-Ari was in the Knesset. He was representative of Otzma Yehudit, of Jewish Power, and he was stayed out of the coalition. And the guys from the Mafdal of the time, the equivalent to Bezalel Smotrich, went into the coalition. So this is also a possibility. This will force Netanyahu to go seek for representatives on Sarah's list.
All right, well, I want to briefly turn now. We have from Bar Ilan University, Professor Mordechai Kedar with us. Thank you so much for joining us. Can you give us a little bit of your analysis? What do you make of some of these polls? What's going on in your head?
Well, this is the victory of the Israeli right-wing faction of the society against the judicial system. The Supreme Court, the prosecution, and all this scheme which actually occupied the country. If you understand what happened here through the last 25 years, since Aaron Barak, the Supreme Judge, started his revolution in which he turned the judicial system above the Knesset and above the government. Today, the counter-revolution started, because if Netanyahu has a right-wingish, even small, coalition with a majority of the Knesset member, he will be there in order to reduce the power of the judicial system. And between you and me, this taking over of the judicial system of the country is more dangerous for Israel than the Iranian threat. And I know some things about the Iranian threat.
All right. So, how do you expect the electorate really viewed this? Did they see this issue as their top priority, or is that your analysis of the way things are going?
No, the judicial system actually has failed because Netanyahu got more than a quarter of the Knesset. In spite of the files, in spite of the court cases which have against him, the Israeli population does not buy this issue about the files. And for me, today the Supreme Court is sitting Shiva on what happened, because the people, they lost all the faith in this the judicial system, and they vote again and again. And believe me, if there is a fifth round within the foreseeable future, he will win again, because they don't buy the whole thing about Netanyahu and the allegations against him.
Okay. Professor Mordechai Kedar, thank you so much for joining us today, and happy Election Day again.
Thank you.
All right, we have a lot of action on our panel
really
here.
quickly. Yeah, I want to hear
Vivian, go ahead.
Because I thought it was interesting when you said, well, do you really think that the person in the street or the voters are motivated by this, profound concern for the justice system? And I think that might be a bit of a bubble, a lawyerish kind of bubble. I know you think it's great if they.
Well, he's a lawyer.
So am I.
No.
But in any event, I think though that that's a part of a much more profound issue in this election, in my view. And that issue is the integrity and strength of the democracy in this country. We are a young democracy, but I look at trends and I don't think that we're moving the right way on the continuum. I feel very strongly, and apparently 80% of the Israeli population does as well, the whole population, so that they don't think the Haredi parties should be in a coalition. This was a poll out last week at some point. I mean, that's an astonishing number. That means that basically only Haredim think they should be in, and 8% of the rest of the population. And that, to me, is a really important issue. And it's not about being anti-Haredi. It's not about being, pro-LGBTQ. It's about catering to a specific interest that actually could care less about democracy. They don't have a commitment to the democratic system. They value halakha more, and they say it openly.
Well,
they want a system of halakha, and I don't think that the influence that they exert in the coalition is healthy. I think that we have a frail democracy.
Just to build off of what Vivian's saying, just remember the Religious Zionist Party, where they were actually contesting with the Haredi parties in terms of votes. So that means that it's beyond the Haredi parties in terms of a certain perspective. I just want to mention something which we haven't touched on, which I think is very, very important, and that is two things. One is, Mordechai mentioned, the courts. Will Netanyahu, will people now try to do something to help him in terms of his issues that he has in court, if he has a majority, number one. Number two, the left. Lapid, at this point, the way I see it, with blue and white going up to 7 or 8, Labor going to 7, I think that's been a statement of he is not the leader of this bloc, and there's going to be some shuffling that will happen over there. The last thing we have to remember is, we've been victims of this before, this is an hour after we have the results. Over the next day or so, we might see different numbers, and we might be getting different analysis. We have to always keep that in mind.
All right, well, we have Mordechai Kedar on the line with us again. He's been watching, right? Yes, and he wants to respond to some of the things that you've been saying.
Yes, I just heard what Vivian said about the frail democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, the fact that the right won does not mean that democracy is frail. There are some people who try to patronize us and say, hey, only the left is democracy. Ladies and gentlemen, even if the right wins, it is a democracy. Israel is a strong democracy. Israel doesn't go to violence as it is in some other countries. Israel, don't worry about the democracy in Israel. It could be very democratic and very right-wingish. Grow up. Get out of this mindset that only the left is democracy. This is not right. No left in Israel.
I'd just like to respond with the greatest respect, Professor. With the greatest respect, Professor, I'm not right and I'm not left. And I think that there are some very concerning signs with the health of the democracy. We disagree, but don't tell me to grow up.
Okay, so let me put this. I do not think that we are a young democracy, nor do I think we are a strong democracy. I think we are no longer a democracy ever since member of the Knesset Miki Zohar was investigated in the police for stating stuff that he was completely entitled to do as a member of the Knesset. When members of the Knesset, when representatives are being threatened by the authorities for doing their work, we are no longer a democracy, and this is the case. Now, I concur with Dr. Kedar with the fact that when you look at the electoral map over here, and you look at the right from Ben Gvir towards Netanyahu, the most important issue of the Israeli right is to win our democracy, to regain our democracy, to take it back from the courts and to take it back from the authorities. And when you look a bit to the left, we look at Bennett's parties and at Saar's party, then you see that the voters of those parties' most prominent issue is to send Netanyahu away. But the second most important is once again to fix our democracy and to put the justices of the Supreme Court back to their place. Our democracy is not under threat. It is no longer effective.
Okay, well, first of all, we want to thank Professor Kedar for taking the time to speak with us. And we are almost out of time, so we'd just like to hear some final thoughts, final comments. Rabbi Lippman, we'll start with you.
Naftali Bennett is going to be the person that everyone is going to be watching. That is for sure. I disagree. I do not think he's going to rush to anything. I think he's going to take his time. He may even let Netanyahu's first month of trying to form a government wane without joining and then wait for another time. That's just the way I see him playing it out, just to show that he gave everything a chance. Let's see how it plays out. But for sure, I don't really see any path forward for there to be a center-left coalition. So the way I see it right now, it's either a Netanyahu right-wing religious coalition or the fifth election. I don't think anyone will want to go there. So we'll probably, assuming these numbers hold, end up in that direction. But again, I caution, let's wait and see the final numbers.
Right. Vivian.
Totally agree. But I think that the strong likelihood is that Bennett will end up in a coalition with Bibi, and that we likely will not go to a fifth eleation.
Right.
The grandmaster puppeteer is Netanyahu, and I think we are all forgetting the fact that Netanyahu has, in the past, has preferred to have a more centralist government than full right, as he calls it. So I think everything is on the table. The market has just been open. I think we have to wait. We have to wait because there are so many votes that have not been. Nobody has any idea what's going on there because of the coronavirus and soldiers and all these. About 15 seats, I think, or something. He said, Dov, right? So that's a real game changer. We have to wait and see, and I think it's going to be a very interesting 2 weeks. And I think that at the end of the day, Netanyahu is pulling the strings on Bennett. Bennett is working for Netanyahu. Look at what happened. Look at where we are. Netanyahu has mastered this game.
Yeah, so I agree with that about Netanyahu. I think the more the numbers sink in, we're right now 46, 47 minutes after the numbers came in, the more it sinks in with me. I understand that Netanyahu is the kingmaker. Bennett is out of options. He is either in the option of being presented as the person who took us to the fifth cycle, or as a member in Netanyahu's coalition. How senior? It depends on how fast they will come to Netanyahu. Now, one more thing about the double envelopes, the delayed counting. Usually, traditionally, when there is no COVID, the outcomes are eventually just take the final outcome just a little bit to the right. Now, because of COVID, the most fractured sector right now within them is the Arabs, and we know that the turnout over there was low. And those people are not being counted in the general turnout. So we might find out that out of those 650,000 votes in double envelope, we might end up with 20 to 30% of them Arabs. Maybe Ram will come in, and if this happens, this means 4 more seats for the anti-Netanyahu bloc, and this is going to be very interesting. And this is a very probable scenario, in my eyes.
All right, well, so one more time, let's go over some of the last numbers before we finish up today. Again, early exit polls, these are likely to change, but some of the averages, we have the Likud with 32, Yesh Atid with 18, Blue and White with 7, Joint List with about 9, Shas with about 9, UTJ with about 7, Israel Beitenu with around 6, Meretz with 6, Yamina with around 7, New Hope with around 6, Labor with 7, Religious Zionists with 7, and the New Economic Party and Ram are both failing to make it into the electoral threshold.
All right, well, unfortunately, that is all the time we have tonight. Thank you again to our lovely panel, Rabbi Dov Lippman, Ziv Maol, Tami Molad Hayo, and Vivian Berkovici. It was a pleasure to have you here.
And of course, thank you everyone at home for tuning in. We love you, and we're so ecstatic that you chose to be with us tonight for Israel's 4th serial election night coverage. May there never be a 5th serial election. Have a wonderful night. We'll see you tomorrow.
But I want the holiday.
Make a wish, you'll see. Take